When people tell you that you are not enough, something inside you breaks, but something else begins to grow in silence. The night my brother called me a financial idiot, I didn't argue, didn't defend myself, didn't cry in front of anyone. I smiled through it, as if the words didn't matter, but they sank into me like seeds. Everyone in the room laughed that night, and maybe that laughter was what hurt the most. It wasn't just about being insulted, it was about being dismissed, being seen as incapable, as someone who didn't deserve to dream big. I walked out of that wedding hall with a calm face, but my heart was trembling. That moment, without even realizing it, became the moment that defined everything that came after in the days that followed. I replayed those words again and again. Financial idiot. Each time I heard them in my head, they burned, but I let them burn, because that fire became my motivation. I stopped trying to prove anything to anyone and started proving it to myself. I began reading financial books late at night, learning about investments, markets, and management, not because I had to, but because I wanted to understand what I was told I could never understand. While others were sleeping, I was studying balance sheets and company reports, trying to make sense of what success really meant. My friends laughed when I talked about financial independence. My family thought I was wasting my time. But I had already made up my mind that silence would be my weapon and knowledge would be my shield. There's something powerful about working in silence. Nobody claps for you. Nobody notices your progress. But that's the beauty of it. Nobody expects your comeback either. I learned that success is never loud in its making. It grows quietly in moments of pain, in nights of doubt, in mornings when you force yourself to keep going even when nobody believes in you. I didn't know where it would all lead, but I knew that if I stayed consistent, I would become someone my brother wouldn't recognize, not because I changed who I was, but because I finally discovered who I could be years past, and every small step began to matter. The knowledge I once struggled to understand started making sense. I began consulting small businesses, helping them fix their financial systems. Each success added a little more confidence, a little more faith. The same people who once ignored my ideas started asking for my opinion. I still remember the first time I got invited to a corporate meeting as an advisor. I sat there quietly, remembering the night I was called a fool. And then I looked around that table and realized that silence, when used right, can speak louder than any argument. The power of silent determination is not in shouting your goals to the world, it's in allowing your results to speak for you. I learned that the world doesn't owe you belief. You earn it through persistence. Every late night, every quiet sacrifice, every uncelebrated win was building something inside me that couldn't be measured in money or recognition. It was building resilience. The kind of resilience that teaches you to smile through setbacks and to find strength in rejection. I didn't need validation anymore, I needed growth. And that shift, that internal change, was what transformed everything. Sometimes people think revenge is loud and dramatic, but the truest form of revenge is silent success. It's the kind of success that doesn't announce itself, it just arrives, surprising even you. I learned to let my results walk into rooms before I did. I learned to stay calm when others doubted me, to keep building even when nobody noticed. I learned that being underestimated is one of life's greatest gifts because it gives you the freedom to rise without pressure, to build without noise, and to win without expecting applause. That's what silent determination truly means. It's not about proving people wrong. It's about proving to yourself that their opinions never defined your limits. And when that day finally came, when I walked into the boardroom of my brother's company, I didn't walk in with pride or anger. I walked in with quiet strength, the kind that comes only from years of silent work. The same person who was once laughed at for not understanding money was now leading financial decisions that shaped an entire company. I didn't need to say anything. My silence, my patience, and my persistence had already said it all. Turning insults into inner fuel is not something that happens overnight. It begins in the quiet moments after the laughter fades and the room empties, when you are left alone with words that won't stop echoing in your mind. The insult that once felt like a dagger begins to live inside you, replaying itself until you either let it destroy you or decide to use it as energy. When my brother called me a financial idiot, I felt something shatter inside me, but in that same instant, something else ignited. I realized that pain could either break me or build me, and I chose to let it build me. The humiliation I felt that night didn't weaken me, it became the fire I needed to keep moving forward when no one else believed in me at first. It was hard to face the world again. Every time I tried to talk about my goals, I could still hear that word in the back of my mind, reminding me of where I stood in other people's eyes. I tried to hide my hurt behind a smile, pretending it didn't matter, but deep down it did. And maybe that's what I needed to feel that sting, to let it burn long enough to turn it into motivation. I started working differently after that. Every insult I'd ever heard became a reason to learn, to grow, to do better. Every time someone doubted me, I used that doubt as energy to push harder. I didn't argue with anyone, I didn't try to convince them, I simply worked in silence and let their disbelief push me further. There's a strange kind of power that comes from being underestimated. People expect you to fail, so they stop watching. That's when you start building quietly, without pressure, without noise. I remember staying up late reading about investments, business structures, and management while the rest of my family slept. It wasn't easy. I failed so many times in the beginning that even I started to question if maybe they were right about me. But every failure reminded me of that wedding night, of the laughter, of the smirk on my brother's face. And that memory became my reason to keep going. I promised myself that I would turn every insult into a stepping stone, that every time I was belittled, I would rise one step higher. I didn't need their approval. I needed to outgrow their opinion slowly. Something inside me began to change. I started caring less about proving people wrong and more about proving myself right. The same insult that once made me feel worthless became my greatest motivator. I began to thank the pain, because without it, I would never have discovered how strong I could be. I realized that anger fades, but determination lasts. Instead of wasting my energy on resentment, I redirected it into learning and building. I turned every bitter memory into drive. When people laughed, I let them. When they doubted, I listened, but I never stopped moving forward. I learned to convert rejection into focus, criticism into clarity, and humiliation into hunger. The more they mocked, the more I worked, and the more I worked, the more I grew. There were nights when I broke down, questioning everything, feeling lost and small. But even in those moments, I reminded myself that I couldn't let one insult define my life. I started to see the power in pain. It either destroys you or reshapes you. I chose the second. I didn't wait for apologies or understanding. I didn't need them anymore. I learned to let my growth be the answer to every insult I ever received. Because the truth is, words only have power if you let them. Once you decide to use them as fuel, they stop being weapons and start becoming tools. That realization changed everything for me. The turning point came not when people started to believe in me, but when I no longer needed them to. That's when I understood the real meaning of strength. It's not about ignoring insults, it's about transforming them. Every hurtful word carries energy, and it's up to you to decide what to do with it. You can let it weigh you down, or you can use it to rise. I chose to rise. I used the pain to sharpen my focus, to discipline my effort, to build something no insult could ever destroy. And eventually, I didn't hear those words anymore, not because people stopped saying them, but because they no longer mattered. Their laughter became my background music, their doubt became my motivation, and their insults became my inspiration. I realized that sometimes, the very people who try to limit you unknowingly give you the fire you need to break every limit. Learning finance through failure and grit wasn't a glamorous journey for me. It was built on countless mistakes, long nights, and moments of complete confusion. When I first decided to understand the world of finance, I didn't even know where to begin. The people around me made it seem like money management was something only the smart ones could grasp, something far beyond my reach. But I was tired of living with that label, tired of being called the one who didn't understand value or numbers. So, I started small. I picked up used books, watched free lectures, and spent nights trying to understand words that once sounded like a foreign language to me. Balance sheets, assets, liabilities, cash flow, every term was a new mountain to climb. I failed more times than I could count, but every failure was a teacher that never left. I made mistakes that cost me time. I realized that the people who seem to know everything today once stood where I stood, confused, lost, and uncertain. The only difference was that they didn't give up, and neither would I. There were nights when I wanted to quit. Nights when I stared at the numbers on a page, wondering if any of it would ever make sense. My eyes would burn from the screen, my mind filled with self-doubt, and yet I kept going. Because each time I felt like giving up, I remembered the humiliation I felt when I was laughed at for not understanding money. That memory pushed me through exhaustion and frustration. I began to see failure differently. It wasn't something to be ashamed of anymore. It was proof that I was trying, proof that I was learning. Every failed calculation, every wrong assumption, every rejected idea was another step forward. The process was slow and painful, but it was real growth, the kind that stays with you for life over time. Something shifted inside me. I started to understand that grit means showing up even when you're tired, even when progress feels invisible. It's doing the same small, hard things over and over until they finally start working. I didn't wake up one day and become good with numbers. I earned it through effort that nobody saw. I learned that knowledge built on persistence is stronger than talent born from ease. I learned that discipline can outshine brilliance. While others had support and mentorship, I had only determination. And sometimes, that's all you need, to refuse to quit when everything seems impossible. When I finally started seeing results, they weren't huge at first. They were small wins, a correct prediction, a successful budget, a good decision. But those small wins began to build my confidence piece by piece. I realized that mastery doesn't come from talent, it comes from resilience. It comes from doing the work no one applauds you for. I didn't just learn finance, I learned patience, humility, and focus. I learned to listen more and speak less, to observe before deciding, to calculate before reacting. Each of those skills came from the hard lessons failure taught me. Failure became my greatest mentor because it never lied to me, never comforted me. It only taught me truth through experience. The more I learned, the more I understood that finance was never really about numbers. It was about mindset. It was about discipline, control, and vision. It was about seeing opportunity where others saw risk and staying calm when others panicked. It was about trusting yourself when no one else did. I realized that the true value of learning finance wasn't in the money itself, but in the confidence it gave me. The confidence to make decisions, to take risks, to understand the game instead of being played by it. I no longer feared numbers. I respected them. I no longer ran from challenges. I analyzed them. That transformation came not from books or lectures, but from falling, standing up, and trying again eventually. The same lessons that came from failure began guiding me towards success. The patience I learned from long nights of struggle became the foundation of my leadership. The grit that kept me studying through tears became the reason I could handle pressure when stakes were high. Every mistake I once hated became a stepping stone to wisdom. I didn't become great at finance because I was gifted. I became great because I refused to stay ignorant. My failures didn't define me, they refined me. And when I finally walked into rooms full of experts and realized I could hold my own, I understood what grit had done for me. It had turned my weakness into strength, my confusion into clarity, and my humiliation into mastery. You said, leadership built from humility doesn't start with power or position. It begins in the moments when you have nothing but a lesson to learn. My understanding of leadership didn't come from titles or authority. It came from years of being ignored, overlooked, and underestimated. When you've been called a fool, when your ideas have been dismissed, when you've been made to feel small, you learn the true value of humility. You learn to listen before speaking, to observe before acting, and to understand before judging. Those years of silence, when no one paid attention to my words, became my greatest teacher. They taught me that leadership isn't about being heard, it's about earning the right to be listened to. As I started to grow in my career and eventually stepped into roles that required decision-making, I carried those early lessons with me. I remembered what it felt like to be dismissed, so I made sure I never dismissed anyone else. I remembered what it felt like to be underestimated, so I learned to see potential in others, even when they couldn't see it themselves. Humility gave me perspective. It reminded me that no one leads alone, and that every great achievement is built on the effort of many silent contributors. I realized that true leaders don't need to prove their worth. They reflect it through the way they treat people. They don't demand respect, They inspire it. The more I led, the more I understood that humility and strength are not opposites, they are partners. Humility keeps your strength grounded. It keeps you teachable, even when you succeed. It keeps your heart open, even when the world applauds you. I saw many people in business rise fast and fall faster, not because they lacked intelligence, but because they let ego take control. I didn't want to be like that. I had already seen what arrogance could do. It could divide families, destroy trust, and blind even the smartest people. My brother's downfall wasn't because of poor management, it was because of pride. Watching him lose everything taught me what humility could save. I learned that the higher you climb, the softer your voice should become, because the echo of arrogance always returns louder than you expect. There were moments in board meetings when my opinion was the final one that mattered. Moments where I could have used power to dominate the room. But instead, I listened. I let others speak first, not because I didn't have ideas, but because I knew that real insight often comes from the quietest voices. I discovered that humility doesn't weaken leadership, it strengthens it. It builds loyalty, respect, and trust. People don't follow titles, they follow authenticity. They follow someone who understands struggle, someone who remembers what it's like to start from nothing. That's why humility is such a powerful foundation. It keeps you connected to reality. No matter how high you rise, there were also times when I made mistakes, when I let my ambition get ahead of my values. But humility made me acknowledge those mistakes quickly. It stopped me from pretending to be perfect and allowed me to grow honestly. I began to understand that leadership isn't about being right all the time, it's about being responsible enough to admit when you're wrong. Every time I owned up to a mistake, I gained more respect from my team. They didn't see weakness, they saw humanity. And that connection, that sense of shared imperfection, created stronger bonds than authority ever could. Humility taught me that leadership is not about control, it's about connection over time. People started trusting me not just because of my position, but because they felt seen and valued. I became the kind of leader who remembered names, who asked about people's families, who celebrated small wins, who listened even when I disagreed. I learned that humility doesn't make you less confident. It makes you more compassionate. It keeps your success grounded in gratitude rather than entitlement. Every person I met, every story I heard, reminded me that leadership is not about standing above others, but standing among them. The greatest leaders are not those who shine the brightest, but those who help others find their own light. When I finally became the head of the company board, I walked into that office with quiet pride, not arrogance. I remembered the person I used to be, the one no one believed in, and I made a promise to lead differently. I didn't want people to fear me. I wanted them to grow with me. I didn't want to command. I wanted to guide. Humility became my compass in every decision. It reminded me that power without empathy is just domination, but power with humility becomes transformation. Every challenge I faced, every person I led, every success I achieved, it all traced back to those early moments of humiliation and doubt. Those moments shaped me into a leader who knew that greatness is not about being above others, but about lifting others while you rise. Redefining success through forgiveness and strength was something I never planned to learn. For a long time, I believed success meant proving everyone wrong, showing them I could rise higher than they ever imagined. I thought that the ultimate victory would come the day my brother looked at me with regret for calling me a fool. But when that moment finally came, when he looked at me with quiet apology in his eyes, I didn't feel the satisfaction I expected. Instead, I felt peace. I realized that true success has nothing to do with revenge. It's not about making someone else feel small, it's about growing so much that their words no longer have power over you. Success, I learned, is not measured by how many people you surpass, but by how much grace you carry when you finally surpass them. Forgiveness was not easy. Every memory of being laughed at, every time I was belittled or ignored, lived inside me for years. There were days I wanted to throw my achievements in their faces, to make them see what they missed. But every time I came close to that feeling, something inside me stopped me. I realized that holding on to bitterness would only keep me tied to the very people who doubted me. Forgiveness became my freedom. It didn't mean forgetting what happened, it meant letting go of the need to prove anything to anyone. I didn't need revenge anymore because I had already won a far greater battle, the battle with myself. The battle to stay kind when life gave me reasons to turn cold, the battle to stay focused when I could have been consumed by anger, the battle to rise without stepping on anyone else's strength. I discovered is not about being unbreakable. It's about breaking and rebuilding without losing your heart. There were times when I wanted to quit, times when I felt too tired to continue, but something always pushed me forward. That strength came from pain, from rejection, from every insult that had once made me doubt my worth. It wasn't the kind of strength that shouts, it was quiet, calm, unshakable. The kind that grows only when you've been through storms and still choose to stand. Forgiveness added balance to that strength. It softened me without weakening me. It reminded me that the strongest person is not the one who wins arguments, but the one who no longer needs to have them. When my brother's company started to fall apart, I had the choice to turn away, to let him face the consequences of his pride. But I didn't. I stepped in not because I owed him anything, but because I had outgrown the need for revenge. I helped him rebuild, not to prove superiority, but to show that I had become the kind of person he once said I couldn't be. In that moment, I understood that forgiveness doesn't make you weak, it makes you powerful in a way that pride never could. It gives you control, not over others, but over yourself. It allows you to lead with empathy, to rise without resentment, to move forward without carrying the weight of old wounds. Redefining success became a turning point for me. I no longer saw it as wealth, recognition, or status. Success became about peace. It became about waking up each day without the need to compete or compare. It became about doing what I love, helping others grow, and knowing that I built my life on integrity and effort, not spite. Forgiveness gave me clarity. It helped me see that all the pain I went through was never meant to destroy me, it was meant to shape me. It taught me patience, resilience, and compassion. It turned my scars into wisdom, my hurt into empathy. I no longer chased validation because I finally understood that real success isn't about applause, it's about alignment, about being proud of who you've become. There was a day when my brother thanked me. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just a quiet moment between us. For the first time, I saw humility in his eyes, the same humility I had once learned the hard way. That moment wasn't about winning, it was about healing. It reminded me that forgiveness doesn't change the past, but it changes how the past lives within you. I could have carried bitterness forever, but instead, I chose to carry lessons. And that choice made all the difference. It allowed me to look at my story not as one of revenge, but of redemption. Success, I learned, is when you can look back at those who hurt you and feel gratitude instead of anger. Gratitude for the lessons, for the strength, for the transformation. It's when you can stand in the same place where you were once broken and feel nothing but peace. I didn't need to be the richest, the loudest, or the most celebrated. I just needed to be free from resentment, free from ego, free from the need to prove myself. That freedom became my truest form of success. It was born from strength that came through pain and forgiveness that came through love. And in that quiet realization, I finally understood that I had not only rebuilt my life, I had rebuilt myself.